a small, serene African village nestled between lush forests and winding rivers, life is deeply rooted in tradition. The village's peaceful atmosphere contrasts with the turmoil of one young girl's life. Sholaidolai, a kind-hearted and strikingly beautiful girl, had once known happiness with her mother, but fate took a cruel turn when her mother passed away when Sholaidolai was just a child. Her father, grieving the loss of his beloved wife, remarried a woman who appeared gentle and caring at first. But as time passed, the stepmother's true nature emerged, and she quickly became a bitter and jealous figure in Sholaidolai's life. Her stepmother resented Sholaidolai for her beauty and the love that others still held for her, even after the mother's death. The girl's every move was scrutinized, and her stepmother's jealousy grew with each passing day. Instead of providing the comfort of a motherly figure, she forced Sholaidolai to perform all the household chores, ensuring she never had time for herself. The stepmother also forbade her from attending village festivals and gatherings, trapping her in a life of loneliness and hardship. In the shadows of the village, there lived a man named Zachariah Sumro. Little was known about him, but his name was often whispered among the villagers, accompanied by a sense of awe and fear. Zachariah lived on the outskirts of the village, isolated and enigmatic, leading many to believe he was more than just an ordinary man. Some said he was touched by fate, others believed he was a prince in hiding, but no one knew for sure. His mysterious presence stirred curiosity, and his story remained a secret, untold but felt by everyone who crossed his path. Every morning, before the first light of dawn, Sholaidolai would wake up, her body aching from the chores of the day before. She would rise quietly, careful not to disturb her stepmother or her stepmother's daughters, who slept soundly in the comfort of their beds. As the others remained in peaceful slumber, Sholaidolai's day began with a series of tasks: cooking, cleaning, and fetching water from the distant river. She would carry heavy jars on her head, making the long walk under the hot sun, while her stepmother's daughters stayed indoors, enjoying their morning tea and laughter. They never lifted a finger to help, and this routine continued day after day, each task a reminder of her place in the household. Her stepmother's cruelty knew no bounds. The girl's beauty and gentle nature, which once might have been seen as blessings, only fueled her stepmother's jealousy and bitterness. While her daughters were allowed to rest and play, Sholaidolai was forced to work from dawn until dusk, barely given enough food to sustain her. It wasn't just the physical labor that broke her spirit. It was the emotional torment. The stepmother often mocked Sholaidolai in front of others, calling her worthless and unfit for anything beyond servitude. One day, as Sholaidolai was carrying a basket of firewood to the village market, her stepmother stood in the doorway watching her. "You will never amount to anything," she shouted, her voice echoing across the village square. "Look at you, nothing but a servant, a burden on this family. No one will ever want you, not with that empty soul of yours." The villagers, who had once admired Sholaidolai's kindness, now watched in silence, their hearts aching for the young girl, but none dared intervene. Some offered quiet words of sympathy, but they knew better than to defy the stepmother. Over time, the insults became routine, and Sholaidolai learned to endure them silently, never crying out. Despite the cruelty, she held on to the belief that one day things might change. Yet deep down, she felt a growing sense of despair as the weight of her stepmother's words and actions took root in her soul. The isolation was perhaps the most painful of all. During the village festivals, when music filled the air and people gathered to celebrate, Sholaidolai was locked inside the house. Her stepmother made sure she had no excuse to attend, forbidding her to leave and forbidding her to meet with friends. It was as though she was being punished for existing in a world where joy was reserved only for those deemed worthy. While her stepmother and stepsisters attended the celebrations, dressed in vibrant clothing and adorned with laughter, Sholaidolai sat alone, staring out the small window of her room, watching the world pass her by, Yet even in the depths of her loneliness, there were whispers. Whispers that reached Sholaidolai's ears during the rare moments when she ventured into the village. People spoke of a man named Zachria Sumro, a figure who seemed both part of the village and completely apart from it. There were rumors of him being a prince, a man of noble birth who had disappeared from the world's gaze after a personal tragedy. Some claimed he had inherited vast wealth and knowledge, though he kept it hidden from the world. Others believed he lived far from the village, choosing to live in seclusion and away from the prying eyes of the villagers. These whispers intrigued Sholaidolai, sparking a flicker of hope and curiosity within her heart. She had heard that Zachria Sumro never attended the festivals, just like her, choosing instead to live a quiet life. Some said he had seen much hardship in his own life, and that was why he stayed hidden. There was a sense of mystery surrounding him, as if the very air around him carried a secret. Sholaidolai could not help but wonder if the rumors were true. Could this man be more than just a distant figure? Could he, too, understand what it felt like to be cast aside, to suffer silently, and to dream of a life beyond the confines of the harsh realities they both lived? As the rumors grew, Sholaidolai found herself drawn to the idea of Zachria Sumro. She imagined a life where someone, anyone, could understand her pain and offer solace. Even in her darkest moments, she found herself yearning for a glimpse of the mysterious figure who lived beyond the village, hoping that fate would one day bring them together. One morning, after days of unbearable torment, Sholaidolai's stepmother devised a wicked plan to rid herself of the girl once and for all. Tired of Sholaidolai's presence and the increasing whispers of the villagers, the stepmother decided that sending the girl deep into the forest on a dangerous errand would be the perfect solution. She called Sholaidolai into the kitchen one morning and, with a false air of kindness, instructed her to take a basket of food to a distant relative who lived far beyond the forest. "You mustn't delay," the stepmother said, her voice sweet as honey, masking the malice beneath. "Your aunt has been ill, and I'm certain she'll need this food. It's a long journey, and I trust you to do this quickly." She handed Sholaidolai a heavy basket filled with bread, fruits, and dried meat. "Take care, and be sure to return by nightfall." Sholaidolai, naive and trusting, nodded. She had no reason to suspect the sinister intent behind her stepmother's words. Little did she know, the journey her stepmother was sending her on was no mere errand. It was a trap. The forest loomed large as Sholaidolai set out, the trees towering above her, blocking the sun and casting eerie shadows across her path. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and the sounds of birds calling out to each other in the distance. Sholaidolai's heart began to race as she walked deeper into the woods, the familiar village disappearing behind her. The path was rugged, and the weight of the basket pressed heavily on her fragile shoulders. But she pushed forward, determined to fulfill her stepmother's instructions. The deeper she ventured, the more she felt the weight of solitude press upon her. As hours passed, fatigue began to take its toll. The dense forest seemed endless, and the path grew unclear and winding. The once sunny sky had darkened, and an unsettling silence descended. Sholaidolai's breath became shallow, her legs trembling as exhaustion gripped her body. The sounds of the forest, once peaceful, now seemed to carry an eerie, menacing tone. Her heart skipped a beat as she heard rustling in the underbrush, small animals scurrying to and fro, but in her weary state, each sound felt like a threat. The sun began to sink beneath the horizon, casting the world in hues of orange and purple. The shadows grew longer, and the once familiar forest turned into a labyrinth of twisted trees and unfamiliar paths. Sholaidolai realized with a start that she had lost her way. She had strayed so far into the forest that she could no longer recognize the route back to the village. Panic set in. Her heart pounded in her chest as her surroundings closed in on her. "Where am I?" she whispered, her voice trembling as she called out into the silent woods. No answer. only the rustling of leaves and the distant calls of night creatures. She felt a wave of fear wash over her, alone, deep within the forest, with no way to find her way home. The thought of wild animals, the darkness, and the ominous silence made her feel small and helpless. Her eyes scanned the trees for any sign of life, but there was nothing. The basket of food felt heavier with every step, and her body felt weaker. Just as despair began to grip her heart, she heard a voice, calm, soothing, and almost otherworldly. "Are you lost, Sholai?" Startled, Sholai turned around, her heart racing. Before her stood a tall figure, his presence both commanding and gentle. His dark eyes seemed to see through the veil of the forest, his features etched with a quiet wisdom that seemed far beyond his years. He was unlike anyone she had ever seen, a man of regal bearing, dressed simply but with a quiet dignity that made him stand apart from the ordinary villagers. I've lost my way," Sholai stammered, her voice shaky with relief and fear. The man smiled, a calming and reassuring expression that eased the tightness in her chest. "I know these woods well," he said. "Come, let me help you." Without waiting for a response, he gently took the basket from her hands, his touch firm but kind. Sholai watched him in awe. "Who are you?" she asked, her voice barely a whisper. "I am Zachariah Sumro," he replied, his voice deep and calm. "I live here, in the forest, far from the village." The name struck her like a lightning bolt, though she'd only heard rumors about him. Zachariah Sumro, the hidden prince. The man whom people spoke of in hushed tones, the one who lived in seclusion after a great loss. The very same man whose name had stirred her imagination for so long. "Zachariah Sumro," she repeated, her voice filled with awe. You live here alone?" Zachariah nodded. "I choose to live in solitude," he said, his gaze distant as if recalling a painful memory. "But sometimes the forest brings me visitors who need help, and today it has brought you." With a gentle smile, he guided Sholai through the forest, moving with ease as though the trees and paths were old friends. As they walked, Sholai felt a strange sense of peace settle within her, her fears easing with every step. Zachariah's calm presence was like a soothing balm to her troubled soul. They walked for what felt like hours, and just as the last rays of sunlight disappeared, they arrived at a hidden dwelling, an enchanting, almost magical home nestled between two great trees. The structure was modest, but there was something about it that felt timeless, as if it had been there for centuries. "This is where I live," Zachariah said, turning to face her. "You are safe here." Sholai's eyes widened with astonishment. She had never imagined a place like this could exist, hidden away in the heart of the forest. And for the first time in a long while, she felt as though she had found a sanctuary, a place where she could breathe, free from the cruelty that had defined her life until now. As Zachariah led her inside, Sholai couldn't help but feel that this chance encounter, this mysterious man who had appeared when she needed him most, was no coincidence. Fate had brought her here, and for the first time, she felt a glimmer of hope. As Zachariah led Sholai through the dense forest, she was captivated by the tranquil beauty that surrounded them. The path became softer underfoot, and the trees seemed to part, revealing a serene and almost magical dwelling nestled deep within the heart of the woods. It was as though the house had grown naturally from the earth itself, with vines curling up the walls and flowers blossoming in every corner. The air was thick with the scent of pine and wildflowers, and a sense of calm enveloped Sholai the moment she stepped closer. This was no ordinary home. It was a sanctuary, hidden from the world, where time seemed to slow down. Zachariah led her inside, his movements graceful and purposeful. The interior of the house was simple, yet there was an undeniable elegance in its design. The furnishings were modest, but every piece seemed carefully chosen and crafted with care. The walls were adorned with tapestries depicting scenes of nature, mountains, rivers, and vast fields, painting a picture of a life that had once been lived with joy. The space was warm and inviting, a stark contrast to the coldness Sholaidolai had endured in her stepmother's house. "You must be exhausted," Zachariah said softly as he guided her to a comfortable chair by the fire. He set the basket of food down and went to a small corner of the room where herbs and remedies were neatly arranged. Sholaidolai sat down, her body aching with fatigue, but there was something calming about Zachariah's presence. She watched as he prepared a simple meal, his movements steady and practiced. He seemed at ease in his home, as if he had lived there for years, disconnected from the world outside. He returned to her with a bowl of warm food, offering it to her with a gentle smile. Sholaidolai took the bowl, her hands trembling slightly as she accepted it. It had been so long since she had tasted anything beyond the scraps her stepmother allowed her. The warmth of the food filled her with a sense of comfort she had not known in years. As she ate, Zachariah remained by her side, watching her with a quiet intensity that made her feel both seen and understood. She had never felt this way before, like someone truly cared for her, not out of obligation or cruelty, but because they wanted to. "This place," Sholaidolai murmured between bites. "It's beautiful. How did you find it?" Zachariah's eyes darkened as he sat down across from her. "I didn't find it," he replied quietly. "It found me." He paused for a moment, his gaze distant as if lost in thought. "I've lived here for many years, ever since I was forced to leave my past behind." Sholaidolai set down the bowl, sensing that he was about to share something important. "What do you mean?" she asked softly, her voice gentle. Zachariah sighed, the weight of the past heavy in his voice. "I wasn't always like this," he began. "I was born into a royal family, the heir to a powerful kingdom. I had everything I could have ever wanted: wealth, status, respect. But it was all a lie." His eyes, usually calm, now held a flicker of pain. "My family betrayed me, using me as a pawn in their own power games. They turned against me, and I had no choice but to run. I left everything behind, my home, my title, my people, and came here, to the forest, where I could live in peace." Sholaidolai listened intently, her heart heavy with sympathy. She could feel the weight of his words, the depth of the pain he had endured. It mirrored her own suffering in some ways, the betrayal of those she had loved and trusted, the feeling of being abandoned by the world. "I know what it's like to lose everything," Zachariah continued, his voice quieter now. "To have people who are supposed to care for you turn their backs on you when you need them most. That's why I've stayed here, hidden from the world. I didn't want to trust anyone again." Sholaidolai felt a pang of understanding. Her own life, marked by her stepmother's cruelty, seemed almost like a reflection of Zachariah's past. She had too been abandoned, left to face a world that seemed intent on breaking her spirit. Yet here, in this peaceful sanctuary, she felt a glimmer of hope. She wasn't alone. "I'm sorry," Sholaidolai said quietly, her heart aching for him. "You didn't deserve that. None of it." Zachariah met her gaze, his expression softening. "It was my burden to carry," he said simply. "But the pain, it doesn't go away. We just learn to live with it." Over the next few days, Sholaidolai began to heal, both physically and emotionally. Zachariah cared for her with a kindness she had never known, offering her not just food and shelter, but a sense of safety and worth. He showed her how to gather herbs from the forest, how to weave baskets from vines, and how to find peace in the stillness of nature. With each passing day, Sholaidolai felt her strength returning, her heart mending. In return, Sholaidolai shared her own story with Zachariah, telling him about her life with her stepmother, the endless chores, the humiliation, and the pain of being unloved. As she spoke, she realized just how much she had endured, and how much strength she had gained from surviving it all. Zachariah listened without judgment, offering only empathy and understanding. Their bond grew stronger with each shared moment. They laughed together, talked long into the night, and found solace in each other's presence. The pain of their pasts, though still present, seemed lessened by the connection they shared. Over time, Sholai came to realize that Zachariah was no longer just a stranger to her. He had become her friend, her confidant, and in many ways, her protector. Their connection was deeper than words could express. It was born of shared pain, but also of a mutual understanding that transcended their individual struggles. And as the days turned into weeks, Sholai found herself feeling something she had never allowed herself to feel before: hope. In the hidden sanctuary of the forest, with the kindest soul she had ever known, she began to believe that her life could change, that she could be more than the girl her stepmother had tried to break. Zachariah had shown her that there was more to life than suffering, that even in the darkest of places, there was light to be found. And with him by her side, Sholai began to see a future full of possibilities. Weeks passed in the peaceful sanctuary of Zachariah Sumro's home. Sholai had healed, both physically and emotionally, surrounded by kindness and care. Yet, despite the comfort she found in Zachariah's presence and the tranquility of the forest, she could not shake the nagging pull of her past. The village, with all its familiarity and pain, was still her home, however much it had caused her suffering. One evening, as she sat by the fire, gazing out at the fading light of the forest, Sholai made up her mind. She would return to the village. "I know you're worried," she said softly to Zachariah, who sat across from her, his gaze intense and concerned. "But I can't stay here forever. I have to face them. I have to show them that I'm not afraid. I'm stronger now." Zachariah sighed, his expression one of deep concern. "Sholai, you don't have to return. Your stepmother's cruelty is still there, and nothing will change that. You found peace here. Don't risk it for the village that never cared for you." "But I can't hide forever," she replied, her voice steady but soft. "I need to prove that I am more than what they made me. I am not the broken girl they thought I was." Zachariah stood up, walking over to where she sat, his movements purposeful. "I understand," he said, his voice low, "but you must know, if you go back, you may face the same cruelty you once did, and I won't be there to protect you in the same way." Sholai turned to face him, her eyes unwavering. "You've shown me what it means to be strong. I'll face whatever happens with that strength." Zachariah paused, his gaze softening. Finally, he nodded. "Then I will come with you. You will not face this alone." The next morning, with a heavy heart but a newfound resolve, Sholai set out with Zachariah by her side. The journey back to the village was different now, no longer a return to a place of suffering, but a step toward reclaiming her power. As they neared the village, Sholai's heart began to race. The familiar sights, the dusty roads, the crooked homes, they all looked the same, but she felt different. She had changed. And yet, as she walked through the village gates, she could sense the eyes of the people upon her, watching in silence. Her stepmother's house came into view, and as if on cue, the door swung open. The stepmother appeared in the doorway, her expression one of shock and fury. "What is this?" she hissed, her eyes widening as she took in Sholai's appearance. The girl, who had once been frail and broken, now stood tall and strong, her eyes bright with determination. You were supposed to be gone. What trickery is this?" Sholai stood her ground, her voice steady. "I'm not gone, and I'm not broken. I'm back, and I'm stronger than you ever knew." Her stepmother's face twisted in anger. "You think you can just return after running away like a disgraced child? You are cursed. The village knows the truth. You are a stain on this family's name." The stepmother's voice was shrill, but Sholai held her composure. She had faced worse. This was nothing compared to the years of torment she had already endured. Before the stepmother could continue, a new voice cut through the tension, low and commanding. "Enough. Zachariah Sumro stepped forward from the shadows, his presence immediately silencing the murmurs of the villagers who had gathered to watch the confrontation. His voice, once soft and reserved, now rang with an authority that demanded attention. The stepmother's eyes narrowed. "Who are you?" she spat, clearly confused and threatened by this new presence. Zachariah didn't answer her question directly. Instead, he turned his gaze toward the gathered villagers, his voice calm but firm. "I am Zachariah Sumro, heir to the throne of a kingdom you have never known. I am a man of royal blood, not some wandering stranger." The village fell silent, the weight of his words sinking in. The stepmother's face paled, and for the first time, a flicker of fear crossed her features. "What nonsense is this?" she demanded, trying to regain control of the situation. "You are no prince. You are just another fool with a story." Zachariah's eyes flashed with determination. "It is not a story," he said coldly. "It is the truth, and I stand with Sholaidolai. The cruelty you have shown her will no longer be tolerated. I will not allow it." The villagers, who had been silent observers until then, began to murmur among themselves. There was a palpable shift in the air. The harsh whispers that had once circulated about Sholaidolai, labeling her as cursed or an outcast, began to dissipate. The villagers had seen the truth in Zachariah's eyes. The man before them was no mere wanderer. He was a figure of authority, a man with the power to silence rumors and restore dignity. As the villagers began to take sides, Sholaidolai felt a strange sense of relief. They were no longer afraid to stand up to the cruelty of her stepmother. One by one, villagers who had once turned a blind eye to her suffering now rallied behind her. They spoke of the kindness Sholaidolai had shown them in times of need, her gentle spirit, and her strength in the face of adversity. "You have shown us who she truly is," one villager said. "Not the girl her stepmother claimed her to be, but someone with heart, with courage." As the crowd grew more vocal in their support for Sholaidolai, the stepmother's defiance began to crumble. She could no longer maintain her grip on the village. The lies she had spread about Sholaidolai were exposed for what they were, nothing more than petty fabrications, meant to hold power over a girl who had done no wrong. Defeated and humiliated, the stepmother retreated into her home, unable to face the wrath of the villagers who had once been under her thumb. In the aftermath of the confrontation, the village began to change. The people, inspired by Sholaidolai's resilience and Zachariah's presence, began to stand up against the cruelty that had once been so rampant. No longer would the stepmother's reign of terror go unchecked. And as Sholaidolai looked around at the villagers who now supported her, she realized that her journey had not only changed her own life, it had changed the lives of those around her. With Zachariah by her side, Sholaidolai had reclaimed her place in the world, and the future, once uncertain and filled with fear, now seemed full of hope. The aftermath of the confrontation was swift and unforgiving. The stepmother's cruel reign in the village came to an abrupt end. As word spread of her lies and abuse, the villagers turned their backs on her, no longer willing to support someone who had wronged an innocent girl for so long. Even her own daughters, who had once stood by her, now recoiled in shame, unable to defend the cruelty they had witnessed. The stepmother, once a figure of power in the village, was now an outcast, shunned by all, her deceit exposed for the world to see. In the quiet of her empty home, the stepmother realized that the web of lies she had spun had unraveled, leaving her with nothing. No longer could she control the narrative or manipulate those around her. Her cruelty had caught up with her, and in the end, she was left with nothing but the consequences of her actions. For Sholaidolai, however, the darkness of her past began to fade. With Zachariah by her side, she stepped into a new life, one filled with hope, love, and a future she had never dared to dream of. Zachariah, moved by her strength and beauty, proposed to her in the most tender of moments. "Sholaidolai," he said, his voice filled with affection, You are the light in a world that has known too much darkness. Will you share your life with me and let us build a future of love and peace together? Sholaidolai, her heart full of joy and gratitude, accepted without hesitation. Yes, Zachariah, she replied, her voice steady and sure. I will. Their union was celebrated by the entire village. What had once been a place of suffering and sorrow for Sholaidolai became a symbol of triumph. The villagers gathered to honor her strength, her resilience, and the love that had blossomed from the most difficult of circumstances. The story of her journey, from the cruelty of her stepmother to the discovery of a hidden prince, became a tale that inspired generations to come. The moral of Sholaidolai's story was clear: kindness and resilience always prevail. Despite the hardships she had endured, her grace and strength had led her to a future of happiness and peace. And as for fate, it had a way of rewarding those who endured life's trials with dignity, proving that even in the darkest times, light would always find a way to shine.